This is not financial advice. I work with the XX Network. Hi everyone, welcome to the show. The first piece of information comes from the Bank of Romania. Now listen to what she has to say.
Just something I'd like to share with you regarding a case where I was surprised. It was a break from expected stereotypical stance in the debate regarding central bank digital currencies. And you might expect that the stance of a central bank decision maker would be to be a proponent of CBDC and an opponent of cryptocurrency. However, at a conference I attended in Harvard in October of 2022, the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, Christopher Waller, actually was a opponent of CBDC and a proponent of a particular type of cryptocurrency to better facilitate international settlement. So just something to keep in mind as...
So Governor Waller, was an opponent of CBDC. He's a proponent, so he's for a particular type of cryptocurrency to better facilitate international settlement. Notice how it says cryptocurrency. It doesn't say BIS Innovation R3 Hyperledger type of closed consortia. It says a cryptocurrency, a public open ledger. And it says to better facilitate international settlement. It doesn't say store of value. It doesn't say a world computer. It doesn't say an interoperability solution. I've heard those with Bitcoin. I've heard those with Ethereum. I've heard those with Polkadot. I've never heard international settlement with any of those cryptocurrencies. As a matter of fact, I've only heard international settlement come with XRP or XLM. Christopher Waller is a Fed governor. He makes the decisions. He votes in the Fed Reserve. He's been a Fed governor since 2020. He was a nominee from President Trump. He was confirmed in the Senate on December 2020. He makes votes and he's there till 2030, January 2030. I did some searching. I found this link on the Fed's website, Thoughts on the Crypto Ecosystem, and this has a speech with Governor Waller. He talks about different types of use cases. He's not really a huge fan of cryptocurrency. He thinks they can go to zero at any point. There's a lot of FUD articles. Now, it says watch live. When I click watch live, it brings me to this unlisted video. He talks about the need for stable coins and how the market brought in stable coins. And he thought that was kind of unique, but he never mentions Ripple. He mentions Ethereum. He doesn't really mention Ripple or anything like that. Listen to what he has to say.
Payment system that a CBDC and only a CBDC can solve. I posed that question about a year and a half ago. It has not been answered yet anywhere that I'm aware of. The second thing I take about this is that when Congress created the Fed, they gave us the responsibility for a safe and efficient payment system. And the model we adopted was we will let the banks be the front-facing part of the payment system to deal with customers, and our job will be to sit in the background and make sure that the payments clear and move back and forth across the banks. So we were not at the front of the house, we were at the back of the house. With the CBDC, you are now stepping up to the front of the house where we are going to engage with the retail customer directly. So I want to know what is wrong, what happened that the old model is no longer the right model, and that the Fed needs to be forward-looking and directly interact with retail customers.
So he's against the idea of a central bank digital currency. He thinks the Fed should be in the background. And if you're pro private sector, if you're pro the Ripple, the Ethereums, the different type of businesses that are built around crypto assets, and anti-public sector, meaning the government, the Fed, Federal Reserve, that's Christopher Waller. He wants the private sector, us, the businesses, to actually provide the products, right? He also talks about real-world tokenization, real-world assets moving into tokens, right? And then those tokens being in distributed ledgers. So the other thing that happened was, this is a guy named Paul Brody. He comes from Ernst & Young. Ernst & Young is one of the big four. It's the top four accounting firms. So he's talking about Citi's PDF that I mentioned in the last videos, That is the $5 trillion prediction. Listen to what he has to say.
I'm actually pretty optimistic, and I would actually say that this is somewhat conservative view. If you look through the Citibank report and you look at the own projections that we've made, that would imply actually a slower rate of adoption of crypto than a lot of other, or really tokenized digital assets, than a lot of other things like cloud computing. So I think $5 trillion by 2030 is actually a fairly conservative calculation, but it's quite reasonable, and I'm quite positive on it. It gives us plenty of time to work through some of the regulatory challenges and the other technology enablers required to scale it up that massively.
So he says that's fun. Citigroup's PDF that said $5 trillion, it's actually very conservative. We could see a lot more than that. This is him. He's Paul Brody, who works for Ernst & Young. He's the global blockchain leader. He's the leader of blockchain technologies, proficient in mobile technologies, business strategy, and Internet of Things. So, listen to that.
Greatest barrier.
There are really two barriers, I think. The first is a regulatory barrier. So there are rules, they're not completely clear, and people feel uncertain about them, particularly in the United States. So there's going to be more action in Europe, which your prior guest was talking about. We're going to see a slow re-ramp here in the US as the rules become clearer. But the second thing is scalability and privacy technology on public blockchains. So today, there really isn't any real privacy in the public blockchain ecosystem. But if we're going to have people keep their major investments, if we're going to have people track real world assets, which are uniquely identifiable, then we're going to have to get through and deploy privacy technologies into the public blockchains with identification, and not for anonymity, but for confidentiality.
So we heard people like Larry Fink. We see this Citigroup PDF. They're all talking about real world assets being brought into the crypto realm. This is trillions of dollars of value that's going to be locked up into protocols, have different protocols interact with that value. Everything that value touches is going to be more valuable. Now, Paul Brody says, once you have something that's real world and you bring it into the crypto world, people will be able to track everyone's wallets. There needs to be privacy. There needs to be some type of confidentiality. And that's why I work with the XX network. That's what XX is trying to do, is build a privacy solution. Have a veil of privacy so when it's needed, you can send transactions through CMIX. And CMIX makes a cloak over it so nobody can track down my wallet. After I buy something that's really unique, let's say I buy a piece of the Mona Lisa and everybody knows that I bought a piece of the Mona Lisa. I don't want everyone to know that this is my wallet. So I would send those transactions through CMIX. It would give a privacy layer where nobody would be able to see what I'm doing. Now, he says that the biggest obstacle is regulatory problems. Regulatory problems. Here's Gary Gensler. He's saying there's nothing incompatible in the crypto markets with security laws. Listen to what he has to say.
Rules. They're called the securities laws and the securities rules. There's nothing incompatible about crypto and the current securities laws. So I think that really the goal of this agency is to bring this field into compliance. And why do we have that goal? It's so investors get the time-tested protections of our securities laws.
They're trying to let the incumbents get their fill while the whole market is down, right? The incumbents swoop in, they start buying up the different infrastructure, they start absorbing some of these companies, and we just saw Fidelity start offering Bitcoin, Ethereum, the trading. So we are seeing some of these bigger companies. We know, if you've been following this channel, I've been digging up a lot of that stuff. A lot of that stuff's happening in the background. They just never had the legal precedent to get involved with it. But that's coming. That's coming soon. As a matter of fact, the Treasury released this PDF that was talking about DeFi and the market structure. So, the system favors centralized systems, and this is a direct attack on DeFi. calling it different types of money laundering. North Korea can move money through DeFi because it's not regulated, right? So they are attacking crypto right now. And the whole point of this is to try to get the big guys to absorb crypto, right? And then you have no choice. You're stuck on centralized exchanges. You're stuck on all these things that the whole crypto movement is trying to prevent. We're trying to make it decentralized, and they're trying to centralize it and put it in the hands of the few. Now, before I play this clip, I want you to understand that money is a social construct. So yesterday I talked about the DXY and being in support and resistance, but I'm listening to a lot of this. Listen to this.
If Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden and the rest of these reckless leaders have their way, an increasing number of countries will do what so many have already done, which is begin to reject the US dollar. And what will happen then? Well, all those dollars will come home, and the value of our currency will plummet even further. And that will lead to poverty across the United States, and that will lead to the typical political and cultural volatility that inevitably follows economic collapse. Disaster. And we've seen it before. Of course, you know the famous pictures from Germany in the early 20s. Banknotes and wheelbarrows. When I buy a cup of coffee, that'll be 30 pounds of currency. Kids playing with worthless stacks of Deutschmarks. That was called Weimar, the Weimar Republic. And that government collapsed because of hyperinflation. And then economic collapse led to communist revolutions across Germany and ultimately to, fill in the blank, the Nazi regime. That's well known. In fact, it's a cliche at this point. But here's the thing that nobody seems to remember. What brought on the economic collapse that set the world on fire? Does anyone remember that? Why did the German government blow up its own currency? Well, simple. The German government took on too much debt in order to pay for a pointless war. Yes, a pointless war did that. And if that sounds familiar, it's because exactly what we have done repeatedly for decades. We did it in Vietnam. We did it in Iraq. We did it in Afghanistan.
Confidence is being undermined. When you chip away at the dollar, you're chipping away at confidence. It's a social construct. The more people come to this conclusion, the worse it is. And that's what's happening. You're hearing everybody say that Russia, China are going to overthrow the dollar, that the dollar is toast. And if enough people believe it, it will happen. Now, this is the person that's supposed to be in charge of the dollar. This person had a lot of say in our dollars, in how our monetary system was being used. Our government was spending dollars. Here she is dancing. This woman got the Volcker Award, where you're supposed to tame inflation like Paul Volcker did, where he raised interest rates at 20%. This woman did the exact opposite of that. She handed over $1,200 into people's checking accounts at the same time, just printing up trillions of dollars. 60% of the money supply came into existence during C-19. And that was her say. Now, this is a person that just stays in government. She's lived in government. Her whole career is in government. And, she's not elected by anyone. She's appointed by presidents, right? So, this is a person with a tremendous amount of power over our country. And I never wanted her there. Nobody I know even knows she exists. So, Islam and crypto. This is really interesting to me, right? Because Islam, you're not allowed to have debt. You're not supposed to have debt. It's against Islamic law. So when you have tokens, they're not debt instruments. While fiat is a debt instrument, crypto assets more of like a credit instrument. So when I have a token and I give you a token, it's like the actual thing. It's not an IOU that I owe you a Bitcoin. It's a Bitcoin I'm giving you. So we're seeing a lot of development come from the Middle East. We've heard Kevin O'Leary talk about the big whales are in the Middle East. And it also fits like a cultural standard, a religious Islamic law too. I just found that interesting. JP Morgan talks about seizing private property to build wind and solar systems. U.S. profits set for pandemic-sized drop, Goldman strategist says. which comes from bar chart. Well, I just wanted to say that, we're probably going to have really bad earnings. So what happens is once these companies get earnings, they have to publicly show them. So if they get hit hard or if they lost, they missed big, the algorithms are going to automatically trade that. It's not even people that are trading this, it's algorithms. And what it's saying right here is a C19 size drop. So it's very possible that the algorithms panic when they see what's in the paperwork. So keep that in mind. China is ghosting the United States. So China reducing bilateral ties with the U.S. following a recent American provocations and aggregations. This is Paris right now. So the other day I was playing Ron DeSantis in Florida talking about the anti-banking type of controlling your money. These people are at BlackRock right now. And remember what I said about money being a social construct. There is something that's big enough for everyone in the world to want to redefine what money is. So the U.S. government not only sold its oil reserves, but it's also decided to sell its sour crude rather than sweet. The infrastructure all revolves around sour crude. So the oil reserves had a ton of sour crude. That's all gone. All the infrastructure revolved around sour crude, and then you took this massive drop. OPEC cut production, oil prices went up. This needs to get replenished, and it costs more money. And that's going to bid the price up further. China, the EU, and France have met. So China and the EU, China and France rather, are settling liquefied natural gas purchases with digital yuan, or yuan. I don't know if it's digital, but it's Chinese yuan. So China is trying to buddy up to different areas of the world. These are usually Western aligned countries. But you see in France, people are rioting. There's social unrest because people can't handle high inflation. This is German food inflation, over 20%. Something's coming that's going to change the way we think about money. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. If you enjoy content like this, please consider joining my Patreon. Remember to hit the bell.